Okay. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I would like to speak about this idea that the new is awaiting you, and then the sky shouted, create. I've written something here which is pretty much the essence of this episode, an idea I will be circling around. I've written here, if we were not creative beings, there would be no difference to our uniqueness. To our unique DNAs. Recently, my attention has been on what is there to do in this world, regardless of what kind of person you are on this planet, whether you're a materialist, immaterialist. The question of what is there to do is a very important one. There are people who materialistically treat life as a sort of journey, and so it's how your attitude while you're in the journey that's important. But in some sense, there is no destination. Pretty much we're an elemental phenomenology. Meaningless elements have somehow emerged as a complexity, and this complexity will be dismissed back into the void of reality. So the materialistic perspective takes one towards emptiness, but when we think about the immaterialistic perspective, whether it is religious ideology, whether it is spiritual ideology, and if we go further back, ancient yogic ideology, mystical traditions and whatnot, the aim for the immaterialist would be towards that which is infinite. But ultimately, the human psychology, the way it happens is that there are people who are trying to get to destinations in life, and then there are people who are trying to go to the afterlife. It is very fascinating, actually, thinking about it, that there's like billions of people on the planet, that they are in life, but they're actually waiting for the next place, the next arrival. Experience of life appears to us as a location, as a world, then people are seeking locations. And you know what's even more fascinating? We are somewhere that we have named as a species. That means we're on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and the meaning and the knowledge that we solidify ourselves in is by our own hand. We are the sculptors of the stories that hold the meaning of our lives. So I was pretty much wondering about what can the materialists do, what can the immaterialists do. The materialist, the greatest teaching that can be given is to just be present with the world. Matter has nowhere else to go, really. It's just here. Existence is. That's a very important factor of it. It's the additional dimensions of experience that make life way more interesting than just stuff in space. I came to the conclusion through my own inquiry, let me start from here, to the conclusion that what is there to do in a world that is just being? And from the materialistic perspective, it's empty, and from the immaterialistic perspective, it's in some sense next world, next world, next world. The only reason I find for the human intelligence and its difference, the fact that we're different creatures, we're not all clones of one another, we're not all, in the same, we're not one, in some sense, one mind moving everybody, do you see? At least one conscious mind moving everybody. And really, we reach a point where there is nothing that man can do about existence other than to create. When I say, and then the sky shouted create, I mean that when a human being accesses a state of mind where they just see simply existence as being here in a known way, and they look at their mind and their intelligence and they see in a very complex way, in an unknown way, it's being here. It is the utility, it is the use of our material dimensions and immaterial dimensions and what they can create. So really what it is, it's as if it's like a violin in one hand, and in the other hand it's like the stick of the violin. I don't know the technical term, but so it's as if that person, the moment they intersect, the moment they connect, the stick with the violin, the strings connect, then beautiful music is generated. And we as a species, just think about what has happened on this planet. The current assumption is that we are all evolutionary animals making sophisticated mouth noises, taking these mouth noises incredibly seriously, creating a sub-reality and a meaningless existential reality. And as the language moves upon existence, the experience becomes the storytelling, really, the storytelling dimensions of meaning. So it's as if our biological body synchronized with our space-based mind awareness requires to lead to the new. There is no purpose to life, There is no greater purpose to meaning. People say, you gotta work hard, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. Let me tell you, whatever you do, it is novelty. It is a new dimension. Even if a person repeats, I have tried to give the same talk, it is impossible. Every day I wake up, the sense of self has changed. Even the world has changed. My own attitude and approach to my own past and future has changed, That means if existence was some sort of puzzle or some sort of riddle, the clue is creativity. The clue is that we are different, not to have these differences nullify and we become the same. But in some sense, our difference is advancing every dimension of the world that is visible. A human being has to create a sense of honor for themselves in this life. They have to find something worth being honorable to, or their intelligence goes into what I would say nanosecond giving up. It's like every second, it's like the intelligence, like I'm gonna give up on this world and that world and that world and that world and that world until There is honor until there is something that we are willing to carry from the past into the future, and that is everything we know so far to bring forth the new. That means I think this would, in my view, I think this is I would say this is the final answer to reality, novelty. God, if you take the religious perspective, that if you look at it through the theological lens, it's as if the creator of the universe is testing its creation, and the test is the new experiences of the individual. From the religious standpoint, the creation has to create, which is a decision. This whole deal about sins and good deeds and all this, it all comes down to the decision the human being makes. The test of intelligence from the religious angle is through the unsealed heart, in some sense making a decision where the universal self smiles before the individual self does. Because the temporary has fear, our bodies will fear their vanishing, their dismissal. I mean, it's like bouncers kicking someone out of a club. That person wants to stay in the club. That person will try to stay in the club. So the body will, in some sense, feel pushed by the forces of the realm, and at some point enter a release. Now, some people interpret this release as the end. Some people interpret this release as the completion or an allowance for the new. That means we have given emptiness too loud of a voice. And we have also attempted to give oneness a voice, which is impossible. That means the word oneness is hilarious. Okay, guys, I think there was a microphone issue, and I don't know how the audience was hearing the episode so far, but I hope that it was heard. The purpose of our uniqueness is to bring in the new. I find that right now we are at the ignorance is bliss phase. Human beings have not looked deeply at language and how it is holding the story of reality. People have not looked at the bizarre nature of creaturehood in a world. And once the being finds their true nature, the performance of their true nature begins. The purpose of life is to bring in the new. Because if there was no novelty, there would be no reason for change. That means we're in a changing universe. It is not a photograph. There's a quote from Carl Rogers. He says, "The very essence of the creative is its novelty, and hence we have no standard by which to judge it." Everything else we try to use as an explanation for reality, it's from the past that can be judged. It is only the new that is not, that cannot be judged, you know? And it's how the new enters the moment, which is a crucial component to reality. If the new enters in an unfamiliar way, I mean, of course, the concept of novelty is that it's unfamiliar. But anything that happens, the mind of the person uses its past to make sense of it. So if somebody creates a new invention, the mind compares it to other previous inventions that were similar to it, or tries to find some sort of metaphor. If the novelty is unknown, it has never been here before, that means in a way where nobody has ever seen it, there is no archetype that can relate to it, it demands a new archetype, then you can say that's what people have been calling miracles or the divine. You know, the word next, N-E-X-T, is one of the most powerful words. You know, a human being can go in any situation and then command the universe to see what's next. And it's as if we are creatures that have used time. Time is like a subskeletal part of our psychology, you know. human beings survive because in their past they have become familiar with dismissal. You know, we look at lesser species like birds and squirrels and we're like, okay, they don't have a mind like a human being where they're planning their future, they're doing this or that. Even though animals do that, but they don't have a conceptual standpoint, they don't have a subjective, or at least we as human beings don't consider other species to have a subjective landscape and spectrum behind their eyes. They're just presence in the moment, part of nature's program. We are part of nature's program as well. However, the main difference is that we're conscious the program is happening, and it's as if we have access to an internally another dimension where the world can turn and change. It's as if the brain is recording what's in front of it, the eyes, and translating it behind its eyes in a way where it can be malleable. It can be re-sculpted either through linguistics, through language, or through imagery, a cinematic language. If you look at animals, you know, I've looked at birds a lot, they just stare and their heads move really quickly scanning the whole location. But they're just there. It's as if like most of nature doesn't have plans. I mean, it's biology, it's instincts made, but it doesn't have a conscious planning system. We may be the first species on this planet that has the concept of time. And so imagine there was no concept of time, it would just be shapes changing. And so without a consciousness to pass reference points, we don't know what the new is. That means the world actually has no obligation to make sense to human beings. It is in some sense anyway. As this strange phenomena is happening, something stranger has happened in some sense, and there has come consciousness to its occurrence and then keeping it. What that means is we are slowing down the world to make sense of it, and this is why the world is going forward and changing. You know, I think about all those, there should be a word for it, but let's say all those states of automata states, let's call them, states that they go towards the ultimate, right? If you're a religious person, the ultimate state is to return to your creator, to go to heaven, you can say, as you had fallen from the religious narrative. From the materialistic perspective, you're still going back to your creator. It's as if from the materialistic point of view, the universe sprang from nothing, from a sort of something that we cannot at least shape, at least like in, I mean, it's a bit intense of an idea to acknowledge, but it's as if the universe began from like the smallest particle, this whole universe that we're seeing. So from the secular standpoint, you were born from nothing and you return to nothing. And this game of everything, nothing, everything, nothing, everything, nothing, in the middle of it there has come change. Change is an interdimensional privilege. At least from the Vedic standpoint, because the higher you go up, the lokas in Vedic thought, the 7 states, there's 7 lesser states and 7 higher states, and think of the 7 higher states as a mountain, and the last 7th state is the bottom of the mountain. And so in Vedanta, as the person, as the being, as there's an evolution of this notion of the Atman, the soul, the Atman returns to the power Brahman, or it's another way of saying that when the individual reaches Brahma Loka, there is no reincarnation. Why? Because in Brahma Loka there is God alone. There has never been creaturehood. But on our path we're on like the bottom of the mountain. So from this 7th station, I would say the endeavors of the human intelligence is to create and to use what it can create, to use what it has to create. And the main thing that we have is consciousness. And consciousness, of course, is conditional. If you get too mystical about it, you'll just realize there is energy being itself in an instant, before it can have a personality. It is only in our motion and our reference pointing system that there is an ego that emerges. You know, usually when a person wants something really bad, or is trying to prevent something in a very intense way, they're like, oh man, look at this egotistical person. But imagine somebody just waiting for the bus. It's like there is no ego. You're just being the presence of your existence. And your experience is just there. When I look at it, these automata states, the religious mentality, it reaches a point where it's as if the man was never here. It was all God from the beginning. And in the non-religious standpoint, it is as if man was never here, and he returns to that state of never being here. Every system of thought is trying to escape the responsibility of manifestation, because in order to walk along a world so vast, we require an infinite archetype. We're still functioning under the viewpoint that we're a specific person. Rather, we are a moment that, like an antenna, that every moment new signal, you know. That means sometimes I honestly wonder when I give these Mr.Within talks, is it like blinking? Is it that in every inhale, exhale, there's a new projection of the self, or is it one self just riding the waves of intelligence? And regardless, at least as far as the human social creature is concerned, we're a social animal. If we were not meant to be individual, there would be no positioning of it. Because we find ourselves in the position of an individual, there must be something to do with it, as if like a person opens their eyes, they find themselves with a pen in their hand and a notebook. Okay, it's as if the person's like, all right, maybe I should write something with this pen. You know, so we as human beings have emerged with conscious intelligence, with some sort of engageable intelligence with the realm, and this intelligence sandwiched between the extremes of everything and nothing, kind of as if like a spinning yin-yang symbol. if we were, for example, in a world of clones, there would be no novelty. It's as if we would be in each other's eyes. Let's assume that type of clone, collective clone. Imagine people in the future have clones of themselves, and every clone of themselves activates some sort of conscious reception to their, I don't know, let's say cyber mind. Our differences give us an opportunity to play a part that has never been played before. In Vedic thought, they have this word they call Leela, which is like the play of nature. It's like nature's theater. Nature is a theater. And so the actors come and go. Right now in 2021, I'm being an actor. What I mean by that is like I'm just a creature existing in a certain format. People listening to me, you're also being actors in your own lives. And there is a dimension to the actor where the actor is its own director in the inner realms behind its eyes, but in front of its eyes, the actor is being directed by the forces and laws of nature. And also collective laws that the tribe, the global tribe establishes. Everything, for example, from, if we take this idea of the actor a bit more deeply, like we look into it a bit more deeply, from the yogic mentality, this world is samsara. Samsara is the ignorant play of forces. In some sense, it is a illusion, simulation. It's a dream. So if everything is a dream, everything you can fathom, it is only that which has not been fathomed yet which may provide the experience of reality. You see, whether it's an idea entering the person's ears or whether it's an idea entering the person's mind for the first time, it has a novelty factor. There is something that is different from the previous moment, and the person may notice it, can notice this. And if this actor considers that the whole theater, the stage, is a simulation, is an illusion, then the actor cannot be convinced by anything. And I find this is what happens to a lot of spiritual seekers. They reach a point where they realize there is no one point to oneness. There is no one man's voice that can capture all of reality, or there is no language that can hold everything. So as an actor in a simulation, the person would be like, everything I do, everything I use from the past will in some sense be part of the simulation. It is only that which is raw from the unknown. That means that which awaits us in the unknown, that is like the pull towards truth. I think we started off as just an attention that was dwelling as a body, an attention that moved as a mind. And the moment the attention moved as a mind, the abstraction became accessible. So it's as if the physical body, limited movement, the mind, even though it appears infinite, but has a limited amount of movement in regards to what is known. therefore rendering the soul as unknown. If the soul is beyond form, beyond shape, beyond objecthood, and even beyond subjecthood, then the only thing that remains is the unknown, and the unknown is potential. So what that means is, it's as if reality, they say, at least from a scientific perspective, there is kinetic energy and potential energy. Potential energy becomes kinetic energy, and then kinetic energy has its own potential, or leads to a potential. So it's this constant shift between potential and the actualization of the potential. And so if we, instead of energy, use the word truth, it's as if we are moving from states of kinetic truth and potential truth. And I'm saying that after you have gone through, let's say, like if we were to visualize it like a sine wave, if as you go from the peak down to the trough and you complete one bell, one turn, it's as if your kinetic life becomes potential, your potential life becomes kinetic. So what that means is, this could be a long shot, but I feel I should say it. Right now, existence is the kinetic demonstration of this potential truth. So right now we are truth in motion, but the ultimate realization of let's say the kinetic truth is that it becomes potential truth. That means the meaning of our lives is to bring in the new, and as we bring in the new, we live out our actualized reality, and then we become the potential of the future generations. And there is no greater, I would say, honor for the human species, because I think about it. I mean, everybody can think about it. You'll see it's as if you live for yourself. Sure, the person lives for one lifetime, like let's say 100 years. But if you attempt, or at least walk towards, the collective vision of humanity, you will see that if we can make the world a better place, we have advanced the potential of those to come. That means it's as if we are too attached to the personality. We fear the disappearance of the mind. We're too attached to the body. We fear the disappearance of the dissolution of the body. And so there is no such thing as attachment, I would say, to the soul. It's one of those things where you either are it or you're not. So novelty is, in some sense, or I would say, it's like I'm seeing a vision in my inner realms right now of the task of the human being to use everything it's given quickly, or not even quickly, but to use everything it is given. So what that means is a person is born and the person is endowed with something. What you are endowed with, what you bring into the realm, you give. Once you give, you open up space to receive. Once you receive, you give, until you begin to realize that there is no difference. That the greatest state, that means the human being that gives, they free themselves from the voice of the past. Lao Tzu has this quote. He says, you gotta let go. It goes something like this, where he says you gotta let go of who you are now to become who you are meant to be. Because, guys, I've attempted to talk about oneness. It goes beyond language. It goes beyond what I've called the language threshold. And I've attempted to talk about the nature of the inner witness which goes even beyond the conditional oneness, and it becomes a sight in emptiness. And so really, metaphysics is like a nullification of individual meaning, and physics is also a nullification of individual meaning. So for the first time, the species, I find, has the challenge of not buying into the materialistic perspective, not buying into the immaterialistic perspective, and everybody realizes that the new has a voice louder than the past could throw into your ears. Also, questions are welcome if anybody has questions. You know, in my experience of giving these talks, it's like I reached a point where I'm like, what else can I talk about? That means if I talk about the future, it's like this big picture of infinite success, or it doesn't exist. Like, these are the two options. And if I talk about the past just went through something, it happened and it finished. So the past exists to us as information that can help recorrect our steps, maybe. But it lived its part. It's like the actors, some actors before us, they came and they performed, and it's finished. Their performance is finished. Some advanced communicators and pilots way before I was born. And the future, it is yet to come. So the meaning of life falls into the present. Any person listening to me right now, just look at your present, and you'll see content. It can be even divided that in front of your eyes, there's matter and space, and behind your eyes, there is content and the absence of content. It's as if this whole time the universe has been showing the meaning of life to us, not saying it, but showing it to us. Change, change, change. And change happens both consciously and unconsciously. Change is the furnace where the greatest celestial weapons are animated, kind of like how in Nordic mythology, many people don't know this, but Loki actually gifts Thor with its hammer. Odin doesn't give Thor his hammer. Odin, I think, creates rules for it, but Loki messes up. In Nordic mythology, he goes to these dwarves, pretty much sets these two types of celestial dwarf blacksmiths like against one another. And then one group of the blacksmiths are smart and they give 3 gifts to Loki. Something happens, you know. They give these gifts to Loki, and Loki gives the hammer to Thor, gives a sort of hair to the goddess of creation in Nordic mythology. I don't know the name. They don't even speak about it, you know. Like it, but anyway, in the shows, but like then there's Odin, and Loki gives Odin a spear. And so Thor's weapon was crafted in a furnace of a celestial nature, and I feel that change is like the furnace where the new enters the realm. The purpose of life cannot be captured from the past. I don't even know what the educational system is doing. It may be informing the individual, but it is not creating an explorer. It is not creating a human being who's like, whoa, am I in a world? You know, once in a lifetime on a rock in the middle of nowhere, nobody knows anything. We created language. Do you know what I mean? It's like the nature of reality more and more as we dive into the sources of our meaning, or the systems we use to capture our meaning. It comes back to novelty. You know what that means? That means the purpose of time is the timeless. And I feel Plato caught on to this. Plato has one of the most greatest sentences written in language, you know, translated into the English language, where he says, time is the moving image of eternity. As if time is the shadow of eternity. The shadow of a singular point that can never be a point. It is a state of endless novelty. You know what it is? It's as if like God has no writer's block, and the existence is like endlessly being reformatted. It's like being written. You see, reality is, there's a man by the name of Ramana Maharshi. He says, let what comes come, let what goes go. What I'm saying in another way is that the aim of, I would say, the end or edge of metaphysics and physics is the entrance of forms that surpass any form you have seen. You know, it's like the person's like, what do I do after I've attained union? After I have attained Satchit Ananda, conscious existence being bliss, what do I do after? And the person wonders, what can I do when I was nothing from the beginning? That means if the brain is hallucinating personality over a meaningless atomic existence, then language is hollow. But if all of this are ingredients for a new manifestation of reality, that means it's as if people are thinking of a photographed way of salvation. But it's literally riding the waves and leaving your mark as each individual has a unique DNA. Every person right now listening to me, there is no such thing as stupid or smart people. Maybe in collective, if we create one game where 8 billion people have to play that game, sure, there could be endless stupid and smart people. But if you look at reality and you see that there are different creatures, it's as if you can't, who was it, Albert Einstein, he says you judge a fish by its ability to fly, it'll go on living its whole life thinking it's stupid, right? So that means every creature, every being, every DNA has a sort of position, and if they are brave enough to not let the past define them, they find themselves in the space of allowing the new to enter. Because if truth is in the past, there's no point of any sort of discovery anymore. You know, this is the attitude that for me, religion, I interpret it very different, I think, than the common religious person. But for me, it's as if all of truth has been said from before, what's the point of living? You know, if it's all set in stone, why continue? And if it's meaningless, why continue? So the meaning is unknown revelation, but not an how would I say it? It is the entrance into the unknown, or the unknown enters whatever known way you have held them. Dawn in the chat section says, what if the content only breaks? Let's assume the content of reality in the outer realms. Sure, I mean, it's not that it breaks, it's like it's designed in a way to change. It's as if the world is a giant shopping mall parking lot, and endless beings, human beings, come and park their car, do their shopping, and then they leave the parking, you know. So the content changes. You know, this is why they say it's also important to be aware of an inner witness. Hence why I use the term Mr.Within. Why? Because if the journey of your own eyes is not as important as the journey of the journey of the world is endless change. And so your eyes miss out on what they can create. Okay, time to go into a quote tunnel. And pretty much, guys, what I've been saying, if I could just do some sort of quick recap. Because we're different, because life is changing, the change itself is a moment of the entrance of the new. Our psychologies contain the world, and the purpose of experiencing life, or continuing to experience life, is to have the water overflowing from not just reaching the brim of the cup, but in some sense overflowing, and in some sense new containers of our own experience of existence being attained. Alright, the quote tunnel. Angela Duckworth. Substituting nuisance for novelty is what experts do, and that is why they are never bored. Thomas Carlyle. The merit of originality is not novelty, it is sincerity. Isaac Disraeli. The delight of opening a new pursuit or a new course of reading imparts the vivacity and novelty of youth even to old age. Irving Thalberg. Novelty is always welcome, but talking pictures are just a fad. Terence McKenna. Nature prefers novelty. Jason Silva. Human beings are attracted to novelty, to probe the adjacent possible. We didn't stay in the caves, we didn't stay on the planet, and soon we won't stay within the limitations of our biology. We move forward, we transcend our limits, we go to the moon, and we create the internet. And this is very beautifully said. You know, the future is awaiting all of us. There is no special person when a species is fighting for its life. Marcel Proust says the paradoxes of today are the prejudices of tomorrow. Since the most benighted and the most deplorable prejudices have had their moment of novelty when fashion lent them its fragile grace. August S. Cofier says novelty is the universal cry. Novelty by hook or by crook. It is an exceedingly common mania among people of inordinate wealth to exact incessantly new or so-called new dishes. I mean, here's the thing, that those who are creative in civilization, of course, it's like there's even if regardless of the content, it's like there's more effort. Any human being in any system, it's like the player that puts in the most effort, and of course skill is important as well, but the most effort usually gets the quickest responsive card. Robert Sapolsky, he says, I think the relationship between social dominance, orientation in people, and the extent to which they're made uncomfortable by ambiguity and novelty is really important. Better a stable world that's familiar, in which I'm doing pretty poorly, than dealing with all the ambiguity of a changing world. We cannot ignore novelty regardless of how our voice claims it. Simone de Beauvoir says, the writer of originality, unless dead, is always shocking, scandalous. Novelty disturbs and repels. Nicholas Copernicus, therefore, when I considered this carefully, the contempt which I had to fear because of the novelty and apparent absurdity of my view nearly induced me to abandon utterly the work I had begun. So guys, this is a very important point. If I remember correctly, Nicholas Copernicus, I don't remember his exact scientific contribution, but he's a very important scientist. And it was close to I think it was before Galileo, where he was talking about how the sun is spherical. I could be wrong. But anyways, Nicholas Copernicus, he's saying that he came to a certain point of view that it was so different than everything that before him he was considering, that he for a second was like, no way, you know. Jean Piaget says, the more the schemata are differentiated, the smaller the gap between the new and the familiar becomes, so that novelty, instead of constituting an annoyance avoided by the subject, becomes a problem and invites searching. That's something cool. Imagine not a meditation being told to people, but as if people, as they lived, they were not just looking at how things were good and bad throughout the day, how things were right and wrong, but rather how things were new. For example, for me, I would say since childhood, I've had a designer's eyes. For me, design was fascinating. It's as if looking at everything in reality has shape design. If you just stand still and just look at something, you just see incredible complex geometrical lines everywhere. And just like how a person can see something and close their eyes, a person, let's say you look at the circular top of a cup, and you close your eyes, and in your inner realms, while you're seeing the cup as you're visualizing it, and your eyes are closed, you also see the circle of the cup. So in some sense, the geometry of reality is the endless invitation of novelty, the changing geometry of reality. And here's the cool thing. If a person looks for the new, they can't find it, because their search is beginning from the past. So anybody who has expectations for the new, it is not new. The unexpected is how the divine moves. The unexpected is humanized divinity. What an incredible world we're in. We're trying to make sense of it from the past, but the future is waiting for us. Jacques Monod says chance alone is the source of all novelty, all creation in the biosphere. William Hanna says the novelty business is astounding. We can't keep up with it. Shelby Foote says, of all the passions of mankind, the love of novelty most rules the mind. In search of this from realm to realm we roam. Our fleets come loaded with every folly home. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. And if you look at it, guys, that's what people are doing. People are looking for the new. The moment you see the past, been there, done that. People, the whole business sector of reality, it's all novelty. And how people access novelty becomes the success of the business. Like so many businesses that were just local shops, they realized there's this whole online dimension. And to have an online digital presence in the coming cyberspace era is important, right? So many businesses that were just establishing, you could say, physical location as a point, realize there's this massive audience in cyberspace. Louis Gluck says we have a disturbing cultural appetite for novelty, and it seems to me wrong. Each new laureate should dislodge the ideas of his or her predecessor, especially when they're still unfolding. I mean, that's a good point too. A person can move past many things and ignore what was said before. But sometimes what is said before still hasn't come full circle. Eleanor Roosevelt says, with the new day comes new strength and new thoughts. Martha Beck says, every day brings new choices. Seneca says, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. J.B. Priestley says, I have always been delighted at the prospect of a new day, a fresh try, one more start, with perhaps a bit of magic waiting somewhere behind the morning. Andra Guide says, man cannot discover new oceans unless he has the courage to lose sight of the shore. Exactly. This is the advanced communicators of the future. Because if you fear the future, you have feared also the possibilities of the future, and the person doesn't know the possibilities of the future. You know, there was a time where I would say the fear of death was very intense for me. But then, my attitude shifted to a certain point where I'm like, how do I know what the future has in store? You know, we are assuming, we are visualizing the peak of a mountain from the bottom of it, you know. But imagine the individual discovers their real home, the true nature of being. You know, Socrates, I share this story in the talks that Socrates, he was sentenced to drink poison by the old men of Athens because he was doing his own thing back in the day where the Greek gods had to walk on clouds. And so he could have gotten out of that dilemma, but due to his honor, he in some sense listens to his inner oracle, the logos, in some sense, his version of the logos. And as he's taking this poison, which is a very weird poison that makes his leg from the bottom to the top of his body slowly numb, he gives a speech before he drinks the poison, I believe. And what he says is that the disciples are like, they've noticed that his presence is not a common presence in the realm, and so they ask him in some sense, where are you going, what's going to happen next? And he gives a very profound speech, Socrates, as so as it is thought. And he says, I will go to a place where there is either no Socrates, or I will go to a place where all the questions I have been wondering about and asking in this life, I will find, I will be their answer, I will access their answer. So you see, death is a human idea, but the novelty and what it may bring, it is pure unknown, and I feel this is really the world peace. This is when the species can be at peace, when it accepts the unknown, not within itself only, but within all archetypes of human design in the realm. That means no longer people can look at each other and be like, I know that person is this or that wrong. That person is standing in the unknown. Their eyes are in the unknown. You know, I have been in situations where the intensity of the communication, it was like a conflict or some sort of argument with someone, and at first it's like, when I was younger, I was like, this person doesn't get it, da 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 da. It was but then I realized, as long as there is space for the eyes to move anew, we cannot dismiss the unknown that is standing behind the eyes of truth. The species hasn't even realized its presence yet, its collective presence. When you realize your collective presence, the unknown moves you. When the unknown moves you, all that you can have is like all these religions that they say faith, that's it. All you can have is trust. You trust your moment. And as you trust your moment, the content finds you. The voice arrives. And the journey of eons in an instant is solved. The solution to death was a memory that was never here. We are the watchers of our realm. We are the voices that roam the void. And we are the final vision of the dreams of gods and men. Dear listeners, can you hear the sky shouting? Create. For the future awaits the gifts of the past, and the present is the only hand that can give it. As the great poet Rumi says, before death takes away all that is given, give away all there is to give, because you're giving to the universal self. That is, I would say, what Mother Teresa understood, what Gandhi understood, what Martin Luther King understood. That beyond the judgments of the stories that we capture our fellow human beings in, we are neither objects or subjects, and it is startling at the same time incredibly exciting that the future cannot be familiar. And so I would say my personal anguish and despair in regards to what will happen, it concluded. The final state of man, novelty eternal. We don't escape time. We don't transcend time. We remember the timeless view. And I will tell you, those people who reach that stage, you become preferenceless, and you will understand what I mean when I say what Mr. Within means when I'm saying like we're antennas. And it's the luxury to identify or to in some sense see ourselves as personalities. That means our psychologies are being realized to be artwork, and every person's artwork is not them. There's a watcher within. That watcher within is not the artwork, yet it is the hand that moves the brush. And once you hear the voice of the sky, all beings in the realm bow to the new glow of mankind. That means those who do something new, bless you. You are the future's guardian. Because even the past is living for the future. You know, sometimes I think like all the religious people back in the day in the 6th century, if somehow they could be reanimated, or there was some sort of time travel technology and they came back and they saw religious people now, they'd be like, holy shit, you guys are still doing the same thing as we were doing? Like, how is that even possible? And so the idea, this is where behavior separates from the ideas of a sort of system. Right? For me, every person is creating or receiving religion for the first time. Just like you see a movie and you get an impression from like the characters in the film. When you read any narrative, any text, you are creating, you are animating the words. It's like the ink on the page through your eyes, which is, through at least the religious context, you're imbued with a soul that is like the extension of the Creator. You know, something I was philosophically really thinking about. I was like, wait a minute, if the angels are considered as the divine will of God, pretty much like God is the sun, and the sun rays are like the angels in the theological perspective. I was like, if when God was dismissing an angel or talking to the angels in heaven, it's like, was God talking to itself? And of course, the humanization is playful, but the reality of it means let us bow at the novelty in God's dream. Without trust, nothing can be wielded. Imagine you were a baker or an artist back in the day in some kingdom, and you were sleeping, and at night suddenly you hear bells, and you see torches everywhere, and you quickly get out of your whatever tent or whatever, and you go outside and you see there, it's like the kingdom is at siege, another kingdom is attacking your kingdom. And in that moment, let's say you're that baker or artist, and you look at your family, you look at your wife and your daughter, and you're like, okay, you know, today I am not a baker. Today I am not an artist. You know, it's as if the command, the event, the nature of the event that arrives brings forth with it the responsibility to become the new sunrise of your moment. Because here's the thing about force, guys, at least conscious force, it is an expression, and the expression has, I don't want to say it has a bullseye, but in order for there to be expression, conscious expression, there has to be a point of focus. That means I can't, believe it or not, when I give these talks, I can't talk about something if my attention is not ahead of the imagery I'm seeing in my inner realms, or the language doesn't move, you know. It would be a situation where if my attention doesn't move quicker than if my attention doesn't move behind my eyes quicker than how I'm communicating it in front of my eyes, it would be as if people would be like, wait a minute, is Mr. Within saying or is he saying You see, it's as if we stall until understanding gives us a clear picture, and then we function. And there's so many dimensions, there's so many things in life that if a person, compares themselves to things that are in a completely different lane, it's as if someone riding a horse comparing the horse to a Ferrari, And so it's as if it's like them trying to run quickly with the horse, trying to catch the Ferrari, but the Ferrari just, rides past at such a faster pace where the horse is like, calm down, buddy, I'm just 1 horsepower vehicle. The purpose of living on a rock in the middle of nowhere is to create. Because you look at inferior species, they're part of the creation of the universe. That means they have been created. The capacity of their creative ability is so limited. There was this video I saw. To be honest, I saw this elephant drawing like a rose, right? Like they have potential, but they're not positioned to express it. Become a student of your eyes. Accept your past and honor it for its service. Accept the present, for it has stood with you. And salute the future, for it will see you. It has no choice. Reality builds upon itself. Novelty is the greatest purpose of mankind. Thanks for listening, everybody. Much blessings and namaste.